In the heart of a green African valley where morning mist danced above the huts, there lived a young girl named Adana. Her name meant the daughter who brings joy, but lately joy had fled from her life. The day her father remarried, shadows began to creep into their once peaceful home. Her stepmother, Mama Kasai, arrived with soft words and a sharper smile. She came with her own daughter, Zoba, whose laughter filled the house while Adana's chores filled her days. Adana rose before dawn each morning, carrying clay pots down to the stream, her feet cold against the wet earth. She would return with trembling arms and swollen hands, only to cook, clean, and serve while the others dined. Still she smiled. She remembered her late mother's words, "Kindness is not weakness, my child, it's a seed that grows where others see only dust." But Mama Kasai saw something else in Adana, not kindness but a threat. The villagers often spoke of the girl's beauty. "She looks just like her mother," they would say, "with eyes that can see truth." Those words turned to poison in Mama Kasai's heart. Her own daughter, Zoba, was pretty, but next to Adana she faded like a shadow beside the sun. One afternoon Adana's father, Papa Namdi, came home coughing, his once strong body bent with sickness. Mama Kasai pretended to care, she brewed him herbs and wiped his brow, but her eyes glinted each time he mentioned Adana. "She must learn obedience," she would say softly. "The girl is too proud." In truth, Adana was simply quiet. When her chores were done, she would sit beneath the great baobab tree behind the house, humming to herself. There she felt close to her mother. The wind through the leaves sounded like whispers from another world. One evening, as the sun sank low, Adana carried a bowl of porridge to her father. His hand trembled as he took it. "My child," he said weakly, "if anything ever happens to me, do not let your heart turn dark." Tears filled her eyes. "Papa, nothing will happen to you." He smiled faintly, his breath shallow. "You are your mother's spirit returned. Whatever comes, remember that." In the days that followed, his sickness deepened. Mama Kasai began to take over the household, moving his papers, hiding his small savings, even whispering to the village clerk. "When he goes," she said, "I will keep this home safe." Adana overheard her one night and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. But what could she do? She was only a girl. Still, when she went to fetch water, the river seemed to murmur, "Patience, daughter of sorrow. The river remembers all who suffer in silence." Weeks passed, and the weight of the house pressed heavier on her shoulders. She worked from sunrise until her hands bled, but Mama Kasai's eyes were never satisfied. "Lazy girl," she would hiss. "You eat my food but bring no profit to this home." Zoba laughed from her seat near the fire, her fingers painted with dye, her neck shining with beads. "You'll never be anything more than a servant," she sneered. That night, Adana lay awake on her mat beside the dying fire. The hut was quiet except for the faint wheeze of her father's breathing. She turned her face to the roof and whispered, "Mama, if you can hear me, help me be strong." The next morning, when she went to check on her father, the silence was different. The air felt still, too still. She touched his hand, cold. Her breath caught in her throat. She screamed, and the sound tore through the hut like a blade. Villagers came running, but Mama Kasai only stood in the doorway, eyes dry. "The ancestors have taken him," she said flatly. "We must prepare for burial." Adana fell to her knees beside the bed, weeping until her body shook. But behind her, unseen, Mama Kasai's mouth curved into a small, secret smile. For her this was not a loss, it was freedom. That night, as drums echoed faintly in the distance, Adana sat alone under the baobab tree. The stars shimmered above, cold and far away. She looked toward the house, where her stepmother's laughter floated through the air like smoke. In that moment she felt something shift deep inside her, a quiet strength stirring beneath her grief. The winds whispered through the branches, "The story is not over, Adana. Shadows fall, but dawn always waits." And in the pale light of morning, though no one saw it, Adana rose from her mat and faced the sun, her eyes bright with unshed tears, the first glimmer of defiance in a world that would soon try to break her. The morning after her father's burial was colder than any Adana had ever known. The sun rose, but its warmth did not reach her skin. The village women came and went, carrying baskets of food, murmuring prayers, patting her shoulder. Yet their eyes were full of pity, and pity was heavier than grief. Inside the compound, Mama Kasai sat before the fire, her wrapper tied neatly, her face dry as bone. Her daughter Zoba leaned against her, painting her nails with palm dye. Neither looked up when Adana entered. "Mama Kasai," Adana began quietly, "Papa's clothes, I would like to keep them." The woman's lips twisted into a smirk. Keep what? The dead need nothing and so do you. His belongings belong to me now. You are only a child in this house. Adana's heart sank. But he was my father. Mama Kaisai's hand slammed against the table. He was my husband, she snapped. And I am his widow. You are nothing but the reminder of a woman who thought she could never be replaced. Zoba giggled softly, her bracelets jingling like mockery. Adana turned away, tears burning her eyes. That evening she went to the river to wash her father's old tunic, the one thing she had managed to hide before Mama Kaisai could take it. The fabric was thin and frayed, but when she pressed it to her face she could still smell him, the faint scent of herbs and wood smoke. The river rippled under the fading sun, reflecting a sky streaked with orange and violet. Adana whispered into the water, "Papa, they are trying to erase you. But I will not forget." The wind answered softly through the reeds as if the spirits themselves were listening. By the third day, Mama Kaisai had taken full control of the household. She went to the chief's clerk and claimed every piece of land in her name. "My husband left no son," she said sweetly. "So the property must remain under my care." The clerk, who owed her brother a favor, signed without question. Adana, unaware of the trick, continued her chores. But when she tried to sell vegetables at the market, the head vendor told her, "Your father's stall now belongs to your stepmother. She said you no longer live in this compound." Shock washed over her. "What? But I..." The woman only shrugged. "Take it up with her." That night, Adana returned home to find her small mat thrown outside the hut, her clothes scattered in the dust. Mama Kaisai stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You will no longer sleep inside," she said coldly. "The kitchen is enough for you." Adana's throat tightened. "What have I done, Mama Kaisai? I have never disobeyed you." "You exist," Mama Kaisai hissed. "That is enough." Zoba smirked behind her mother, her beaded hair glinting in the firelight. "Don't cry, sister," she said mockingly. "Maybe when you marry a poor farmer, you'll get your own kitchen to sleep in." Adana turned away before they could see her tears. She sat beside the dying fire outside, listening to the night insects sing. Every sound felt sharper, every shadow heavier. Days bled into weeks. The household moved on as if she were invisible. She worked harder than ever, tending to goats, scrubbing floors, cooking meals she wasn't allowed to eat. The only kindness she received came from the old woman next door, Mama Ojeki, who sometimes slipped her a piece of yam or a small gourd of water. One night, Mama Ojeki whispered, "Child, the spirit of your mother watches. Do not let them break your heart. A storm always tests the tree that will one day stand tallest." Adana nodded faintly. Her voice was almost gone from lack of use. "Thank you, Mama." But in the silence of her lonely nights, she began to hear whispers, her father's voice, faint but clear. "Adana, remember who you are." Then one evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, Mama Kaisai called Zoba into the hut. Their voices were low, urgent. Adana, carrying water from the stream, paused outside the door. "She grows stronger every day," Mama Kaisai muttered. "Even beaten, even hungry, she stands tall. If she stays, people will begin to see her, and they will remember her father's promise to her." Zoba's voice trembled. "What will you do, Mama?" Mama Kaisai's tone turned to ice. "We will make her disappear." Adana froze, her heart pounding. The clay pot slipped from her fingers and shattered. The noise made both women look up. She ran before they could come outside, sprinting into the dark, her breath ragged. The rain began to fall, soaking her thin wrapper as she hid behind the baobab tree, the one her father had planted when she was born. Lightning flashed across the sky, and for a moment she saw her reflection in the wet bark, not a frightened child but a girl standing tall, trembling but unbroken. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered, "Whatever they plan, I will not be silent." But in the house behind her, Mama Kaisai's voice rose like a curse in the storm. "If the earth must swallow her to keep what's mine, then so be it." And with those words, the trap for Adana's destruction began to take form. One that would test not just her strength, but the power of the unseen world that watched over her. The night after Mama Kaisai's chilling words, the rain had washed the village clean, but not Adana's fears. The air was heavy, and silence pressed against the compound like something alive. Mama Kaisai moved around quietly that morning, her voice unusually calm. She even offered Adana a piece of roasted yam, the first act of kindness in weeks. "You've worked hard, my daughter," she said sweetly. "You must be tired. Today I will send you to the old storeroom to rest. It's quiet there, no one will disturb you." Adana blinked in surprise. Her hands hesitated as she reached for the food. "Thank you, Mama," she murmured, though her heart felt uneasy. The storeroom sat on the far edge of the compound, near the old well. It was small, windowless, and used mostly for keeping sacks of cassava and baskets of grain. When Adana entered, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. Mama Kasai smiled from the doorway. "Rest here," she said softly. "I will send Zoba to bring you water." Adana nodded and stepped inside. She had barely turned to look around when she heard the door slam. The sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place froze her blood. "Mama?" she called, her voice trembling. "Mama Kasai? Why did you lock the door?" No answer. "Mama," she shouted, pounding on the wood. "Please? Let me out." Her only reply was the fading echo of footsteps, and then silence. Hours passed. The air grew hotter, harder to breathe. She pushed against the door until her palms bled, but it wouldn't budge. Her throat burned with thirst and fear coiled tight in her stomach. Outside, Zoba stood beside her mother near the fire. "Mama, are you sure?" she asked in a whisper. "If someone finds out." "No one will find out," Mama Kasai said coldly. "By the time anyone asks, the storeroom will be covered. The rains will come. The earth will close over her, and we will tell the village she ran away." Zoba swallowed, looking toward the storeroom's dark outline. "But Mama, she's my sister." "Do not speak that word again," Mama Kasai snapped. "She is not your blood. She is a shadow that must disappear." That night, while the moon hid behind clouds, the two women carried baskets of soil to the back of the compound. They began covering the small wooden structure little by little, until only the roof peaked above the ground. The rain returned, soft at first, then heavier, washing the mud into every crack. Inside, Adana screamed until her voice broke. She clawed at the walls, tears and sweat mingling on her face. "Papa," she cried. "Papa, help me." In the darkness she could barely see. Her fingernails tore against the rough wood, but the door held. When she tried to shout again, her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Then something strange happened. The wind outside howled, but beneath it she heard something else. A low hum. Like a song carried by the air. It was the song her father used to sing while carving stools by the fire. "The ground knows its own, the tree bows to the seed that bore it." Adana froze. "Papa?" she whispered. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then, without knowing why, she began to hum the same tune. Her voice was weak but steady. The sound filled the cramped room like light pushing against darkness. Suddenly, a soft tremor rippled through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. Adana gasped. The earth itself seemed to respond. Outside, Zoba heard it too. The wind swirled around the compound in strange circles, bending the flames of the fire backward. She turned to her mother, frightened. "Mama, the air, it's changing." Mama Kasai scoffed, though her eyes darted nervously toward the storeroom. "Just the storm," she muttered. But when the lightning flashed, she saw something that made her heart skip, a faint blue glow under the mud where the storeroom lay buried. "Mama!" Zoba cried, grabbing her arm. "Look." Silence. Mama Kasai hissed. "It's nothing. Go inside." But even as they ran, the glow spread like veins of light under the earth, pulsing in rhythm with Adana's song. Inside the sealed darkness, Adana's strength began to fade. She leaned against the wall, her breath shallow. "If I must die," she whispered, "let me die as my father's daughter." Her eyes fluttered closed. Then silence. For a long moment only the rain spoke. But deep within the mud, the faint hum grew again, not of fear this time but of something awakening. The baobab tree outside swayed though the wind had died. Its roots dug deeper, reaching toward the buried room. From its trunk, a small crack appeared, glowing faintly like fireflies. By dawn, the storeroom was silent, its surface covered completely in wet earth. Mama Kasai smiled coldly at her work. "It is done," she said, brushing her hands. But as she turned to leave, a strange sound echoed behind her, soft like a heartbeat beneath the ground. She froze. The air trembled. And though she couldn't see it, far below, Adana's hand moved. Her fingers twitched, faint but alive. The earth had not taken her. It was holding her. The silence inside the earth was deep, too deep. Adana's body lay still, her heartbeat faint but steady. The mud pressed around her, cold and heavy, yet she did not feel suffocated. It was as if something ancient beneath the ground was keeping her alive. When she finally opened her eyes, there was no light, only darkness thick as cloth. Her first breath came slow, trembling. The air tasted of soil and rain. She tried to move, but her limbs were weak, half buried. Am I dead? She whispered to herself, the sound barely more than a thought. Then a soft glow shimmered in front of her, blue and gold threads of light weaving through the soil, moving like veins under skin. They surrounded her, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. A gentle voice rose from the earth, deep, ancient, and calm. You are not dead, daughter of Mba. The ground remembers the innocent. Adana's eyes widened. Who speaks to me? The voice replied, I am the spirit of the ground that cradled your father. When he was buried, his spirit sank deep into me, and his love for you has kept me awake. Tears filled her eyes, cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. Papa? A soft vibration rippled around her like a caress. He cannot speak, but his spirit watches. You must rise, Adana. The time has not ended for you. She tried to push upward, but her hands met the weight of the world. The mud was too thick. Her breath quickened, panic clawing again. I can't, she cried. The voice grew firmer yet kind. Do not fight the earth, become part of it. The same soil that buries also gives birth. Stretch your fingers like roots and you will find strength. Adana shut her eyes, steadying her breath. She spread her hands slowly, feeling the mud, the coldness, the softness, the quiet pulse beneath. With every breath, the glow around her deepened. Her fingers tingled. And then she felt it, energy moving through her palms, through her arms, filling her veins with warmth. It was like the heartbeat of the land itself. She began to move. Not with force but with surrender. The soil shifted as if it knew her path. Small gaps opened, grains of sand slipping away like water. She pressed upward again, stronger this time. Outside, the sky had turned pale gray. The rain had stopped, but thunder rumbled far away. Mama Kasai was stirring the morning porridge when she heard it, a soft thud from the ground behind the compound. She frowned, listening. Another thud followed, louder. Then another. Zoba looked up nervously. Mama, that sound? Be quiet, Mama Kasai snapped, her voice trembling slightly. It's just the storm settling the earth. But her hands shook. Outside, the mound of earth where the storeroom once stood began to crack. Thin lines spread across the surface, glowing faintly with the same blue-gold light. Birds that perched nearby suddenly took flight, crying out. Inside the soil, Adana gasped as air rushed toward her. She clawed her way upward, mud sliding off her arms. Her head broke through the surface just as lightning split the sky. She coughed, gasping, her body trembling from exhaustion. The rain began again, washing the dirt from her face, revealing eyes burning with something new, not fear but power. Zoba screamed when she saw her. Mama. She's alive. Mama Kasai turned, her mouth falling open. The spoon slipped from her fingers. For a moment she could not speak. Adana stood slowly, covered in mud but upright, breathing hard. Her hair clung to her face, her wrapper torn. The blue-gold glow still lingered faintly around her body, like the last light of dawn. Mama Kasai, she said softly, her voice steady despite her shaking. Why? The older woman stumbled backward. You were dead. You cannot be here. You. Adana stepped closer. The earth does not keep the innocent. The words hung heavy in the air. Even the wind seemed to stop. Zoba fell to her knees, trembling. Adana. I didn't want to. Adana looked at her with calm eyes. I know. Then turning to her stepmother again she said, You buried me with lies. But the truth dug me out. Mama Kasai's lips quivered, fury and fear twisting her face. You think you can come back and shame me? You should have stayed in the earth where you belong. Adana didn't answer. She turned slowly toward the rising sun, her skin glowing under its light. Each breath she took seemed to make the ground tremble slightly, as if the world itself recognized her rebirth. From the distance, a few villagers appeared, drawn by the noise. When they saw her, muddy, weak but standing, they stopped in their tracks. One of the elders whispered, That is Mba's daughter. She's alive. The whispers spread quickly. People gathered, eyes wide with awe and fear. Mama Kasai's face drained of color. You'll ruin me, she hissed. You'll destroy my name. Adana turned back to her. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose envy over love. The crowd fell silent. The air between them crackled with something unseen, justice, quiet but unyielding. And then Adana did something no one expected. She bowed her head slightly. I forgive you, she said softly. But the earth does not forget. A sudden gust of wind swept through the compound, strong enough to make the firewood scatter. The baobab tree groaned, its branches bending low. Mama Kasai staggered, clutching her chest as a deep rumble echoed from beneath the ground. Zoba screamed again. The villagers crossed themselves, whispering prayers. Adana stood still, her face calm. The storm that followed was not of rain, it was of reckoning. The morning after Adana's return, the village was no longer at peace. Word spread like wildfire, the girl who was buried has come back. Some said it was witchcraft. Others said it was the gods' justice. By midday the entire marketplace buzzed with whispers and fear. When Adana walked through the center of town, people moved aside. Some bowed their heads in shame, others crossed themselves for protection. Children peered from behind their mother's wrappers, eyes wide. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any curse. At the edge of the square stood Elder Nady, the oldest man in the village, the same one who had blessed Mama Kaisai's second marriage years ago. His back was bent, but his voice still carried strength. When he saw Adana, his walking stick trembled in his hand. "Child," he said hoarsely, "where did you come from?" "We buried you." Adana met his eyes, her voice steady. "You buried my body, not my spirit." The ground remembered me. The crowd gasped. Some dropped to their knees. "Are you a ghost?" someone whispered. She shook her head. "No. I am what truth looks like when it rises from the dirt." Her words cut through the murmurs like a blade. Mama Kaisai appeared from her compound then, her face pale and streaked with sweat. Zoba followed behind her, guilt written all over her young face. The crowd turned toward them, voices rising. She buried the girl alive. She wanted her inheritance. The chief's guard stepped forward, holding their spears, unsure whether to protect or punish. The air was heavy with judgment. Mama Kaisai's lips trembled. "They're lying. It was an accident. The roof fell." Adana raised a hand. "No roof fell. You told them I ran away. But my father's spirit called me back to uncover your truth." The crowd erupted. Shouts, cries, and curses filled the square. The guards moved closer to Mama Kaisai. Elder Nady lifted his staff. "Enough," he thundered. The noise stilled. He turned to Adana. "If you truly live, then the gods have spoken through you. The ground never lies. Tell us what happened." Adana took a deep breath. "The night she buried me, I felt her hands push the earth over my face. I could hear her breathing above me, fast, afraid, angry. She thought if I was gone, she would take all that my father left for me. But the ground, the same ground that covered me, carried me back." Her voice cracked slightly, but she did not cry. "I rose not to seek revenge, but to bring light where she buried darkness." Mama Kaisai screamed suddenly, covering her ears. "Enough. Stop." Her knees gave way. "I see him. I see MBA." Everyone froze. She looked around wildly, eyes glassy. "He's here, your father? He's looking at me." She pointed toward the empty air near the baobab tree, trembling. "Tell him to stop staring. I did what I had to do." But no one saw anything. Only Adana's calm gaze met hers. "Maybe," Adana said softly, "you finally see the truth you buried." Mama Kaisai began to wail. Her cries echoed across the square, raw and broken. The crowd backed away as she collapsed fully to the ground, shaking. Zoba ran to her side, sobbing. Elder Nady lowered his staff slowly. "The gods have passed judgment," he said. "Let her live with what she has seen. No hand must strike her. Her punishment will come from within." Adana closed her eyes, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Later that night, as the village slept uneasily, Adana sat by the river again, the same one that had whispered to her when she was buried. The moon glimmered on the water, soft and silver. "I didn't want her to suffer," she whispered to the wind. "I just wanted peace." The water rippled gently as if answering. A faint shimmer glowed beneath the surface, like her father's spirit smiling through reflection. "You've done what I could not," the wind seemed to say. Adana smiled faintly. "Then maybe now I can begin again." Behind her, the lights of the village flickered. The people who had once ignored her now spoke her name with awe and shame. But Adana did not turn toward them. She looked only at the river, at the life waiting beyond vengeance. The night grew still. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. And beneath the silver moonlight, Adana rose to her feet, reborn not by the god's mercy, but by her own unbreakable will. Days passed after Mama Kaisai's public breakdown, and the village grew strangely quiet. The air itself seemed to carry Adana's name, whispered in marketplaces, murmured around cooking fires, told to children at night as a warning and a lesson. Do not bury truth, for it will rise again. Adana stayed away from the noise. She spent her mornings at the river, washing her hands slowly, letting the cold water run between her fingers. Each drop felt like a memory slipping away, the fear, the darkness, the sound of earth pressing against her breath. She no longer dreamt of vengeance, she dreamt of freedom. One afternoon, while she tended to her small farm by the riverbank, an old woman approached. Her name was Igioma, known in the village as a healer and seer. Her eyes were milky with age, but her voice carried the weight of the unseen. "I have waited many years to see a spirit walk in flesh," she said. "But you are not spirit, are you?" Adana smiled faintly. "No, Mama. I am only a woman who refused to stay buried." The old woman nodded. "The gods test those they intend to raise. You have walked through death and found light. Now you must use that light to heal." Adana frowned. "Heal what?" "The fear in others," Igioma replied. "The wounds in yourself." In the following days, Adana began helping those who came to her. At first, it was simple things: blessing newborns with river water, comforting widows, helping farmers choose seeds. People began to call her Adamuo, the daughter of spirits. Her quiet strength drew them, and soon even the elders sought her wisdom. But peace is never without shadow. Zoba, her stepsister, often lingered near her garden, torn between shame and longing. One evening as the sun dipped low, Zoba approached with trembling hands. "Sister," she whispered, "I cannot sleep. I see you in my dreams, standing in the earth where Mama buried you. I hear you calling my name." Adana turned slowly. Her voice was soft but firm. "I did call your name. I begged you to stop her that night." Zoba fell to her knees, sobbing. "I was afraid. She said she would curse me if I disobeyed. I wanted to save you, but I couldn't." Adana knelt beside her, lifting her chin. "You could have spoken sooner. But your silence buried you too." Zoba wept harder, her tears mixing with the dust. "Then let me make it right. Let me serve you." Adana shook her head gently. "Do not serve me. Serve the truth. Live better than you did before, that will be enough." The two sisters sat there for a long time, the sunset wrapping them in a soft orange glow. For the first time Zoba smiled weakly. "You're not angry?" Adana looked toward the horizon. "Anger is another kind of grave. I've had enough of those." The next morning the villagers awoke to see Adana teaching young girls near the river, showing them how to till soil, how to plant seeds that would feed them through hard seasons. The same ground that had almost swallowed her now bloomed with life under her hands. Igioma watched from a distance and whispered, "The dead has returned not to haunt, but to heal." As days turned into weeks, the village changed. The people became kinder, more watchful of their own cruelty. Men who once mocked women for their weakness now sent their daughters to learn from Adana. Even the chief invited her to his council to speak on fairness and compassion. When she stood before them, she said quietly, "No heart grows in the darkness of pride. Let every hand that holds power remember that life can turn even dust into bloom." Her words left the elders silent, their heads bowed. For the first time, Adana felt not pain or fear, but peace, the kind that grows from surviving without bitterness. That night, as fireflies flickered along the riverbank, she whispered a final prayer, "Father, I have forgiven them. Let my name mean more than sorrow." The river shimmered in reply, carrying her reflection, no longer the frightened girl who was buried, but a woman reborn from the ground that once betrayed her. The moon had changed its face many times since the night Adana forgave her stepmother and sister, and with each passing season her name grew, whispered not with fear anymore but with honor. People came from distant villages to hear her words, to touch the soil she planted, to drink the water she blessed. They said her presence brought rain after drought and peace after quarrel. But fame, like wind, never comes alone. It carries both pollen and dust. One afternoon a group of strangers arrived from the neighboring kingdom. They wore fine clothes dyed in deep blues and reds, their hair braided in the royal style. The tallest among them introduced himself as Chief Izioma, an envoy of the young King Oba. "Our ruler has heard of the woman who rose from death," he said, bowing slightly. "He wishes to meet her." The villagers gathered, murmuring in awe. To be summoned by a king was no small thing. Adana felt both fear and calm stir in her heart, fear of returning to the world of power and deceit, calm because she knew who she was now. She nodded. "Tell your king I will come when the next moon is full." When the night arrived, the path to the kingdom glowed under starlight. The journey was long, winding through forests and plains. The villagers walked with her until the borders, singing softly as she passed. The earth that buried her now carries her steps. When she entered the palace courtyard, she was greeted by a sight that stole her breath. Tall pillars of ivory gleamed in the sun, and fountains danced in the center, spilling cool water into carved basins. But beyond all the splendor stood King Oba, young, proud, and curious. His eyes held both intelligence and weariness, the look of one who had seen too much too soon. He greeted her with respect. "They tell me you came back from the grave, woman of the river. Tell me, what did death teach you?" Adana met his gaze without flinching. "That the living bury each other every day, with lies, with greed, with pride. But only truth can dig us out." The court fell silent. The king studied her face for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You speak like one who has seen the gods." "I've only seen the hearts of people," she said softly. "That is enough." Over the next few days, the king invited her to stay within the palace gardens, to rest and speak with his council. Adana taught them about patience, about tending the earth as one tends a soul. Servants listened at the edges of the walls, spreading her words like seeds. But not everyone welcomed her presence. The Queen Mother, old and stern, saw danger in her influence. "She speaks too freely," she warned the king. "Women who rise without permission unsettle the order of men." King Oba laughed lightly. "Then perhaps the order of men needs unsettling." Still, whispers began to grow. Some said Adana bewitched the king. Others claimed she was no human at all, that she had stolen her wisdom from the spirits. Adana noticed the glances, the sudden silences when she entered rooms. She had seen this pattern before, admiration turning into envy, curiosity into fear. One evening she walked alone through the palace gardens, watching the lilies bend in the night breeze. She felt a familiar ache, not of pain but of memory. She remembered her stepmother's jealousy, her sister's guilt, and how easily love can turn to cruelty when poisoned by insecurity. Then from behind her she heard footsteps. It was the king. "You are troubled," he said gently. She turned. "The more people praise, the more they prepare stones in secret. I know this truth well." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Would you rather I send you away so that envy does not find you?" She shook her head. "I did not survive the grave to hide from shadows. If they must test my light, let them." The king smiled. "You have the courage of 100 warriors. I have only the scars of one who learned not to fear pain," she replied. The next morning, word spread that the royal court would host a feast, to honor Adana, the woman of the river, for her wisdom and courage. As drums echoed through the palace walls and bright fabrics fluttered like wings in the wind, Adana stood by the open balcony, her heart steady. She had faced the darkness of the earth, she could face the darkness of men. The river that once buried her now flowed through her veins, calm, deep, unstoppable. And as the sun rose over the golden roofs, she whispered to herself, "Let the world see what becomes of a woman they once left for dead." The feast that celebrated Adana's rise began with drums that shook the palace walls and laughter that filled the air like perfume. But beneath the music, something cold was waiting. The king sat upon his high stool, dressed in white and gold. Beside him, Adana wore a simple wrapper of blue cloth, her only jewelry a string of cowries around her neck. Her calm stood out among the shining garments and jeweled smiles. The nobles toasted her name, the woman who rose from the earth, the voice of the river. But not every cheer carried warmth. The Queen Mother's eyes followed her constantly. Her lips smiled, but her fingers twisted restlessly around her staff. "Too many are listening to her words," she murmured to her maid. "If this continues, they will forget who holds power here." That night, while the moon glowed pale above the palace roofs, the Queen Mother sent for her most trusted advisor, an old priest named Orica. "You once served my late husband," she said. "You know how dangerous it is when the hearts of men sway toward a stranger." Orica bowed deeply. "What would you have me do, my queen?" She leaned closer. "Find out who this woman truly is. They say she rose from the grave, I say she never died because she is not of this world." Orica's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "Then we shall test her spirit." The next morning, as Adana walked through the courtyard, she found a small clay pot placed before her door. Inside was river water mixed with white chalk, a test known among the elders. If she were pure, the water would stay clear. If she were of evil, it would turn dark. Adana smiled softly, recognizing the trick. "When they cannot bury you with soil," she said, "they try with suspicion." She lifted the pot, poured it gently into the earth, and said a quiet prayer. The ground absorbed it without a sound, and to the amazement of those watching, lilies began to bloom where the water had fallen. Word spread fast. Some called it a miracle, others whispered that it was witchcraft. The king heard of it and summoned her. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Do you carry the power of the spirits?" Adana met his gaze. I carry only what every woman carries, the breath of her ancestors and the fire of her pain. The king said nothing, but his respect for her deepened. The queen mother, however, clenched her jaw. If faith cannot bury her, she hissed to Orica later that night, then fear will. Days turned into weeks. Strange things began happening around the palace. Chickens found dead at the gates, children waking with nightmares, whispers of curses that filled the air. Each time someone found a way to point toward Adana. But instead of defending herself, she helped the fearful. She comforted the crying children, cleaned the temple walls, and prayed with those who doubted her. Evil feeds on panic, she told them. Calm is its hunger's end. Her grace silenced most tongues, but not all. One morning the queen mother fell suddenly ill. The healers found no cause. Some servants swore they had seen Adana visit her chamber the night before. That rumor was enough. She has poisoned me, the queen mother gasped, clutching her chest. She wishes to take my son's throne. Guards were sent immediately. They found Adana in the palace garden, tending to the lilies. She didn't resist when they surrounded her. The king came soon after, eyes full of disbelief and pain. Tell me it isn't true, he said. Adana's face was calm. If I wished her harm, would I have healed the sick she cursed with her envy? The truth needs no defense, my king, it only waits for time to uncover it. But court law was harsh. Until her innocence was proven, she would be imprisoned. The queen mother's sickness deepened, and so did the hatred of those who had once cheered her. As the guards led her away, the sky began to darken, clouds gathering faster than wind could carry them. Thunder rolled across the horizon. One of the guards muttered, "Even the heavens protest." Adana looked up. "No," she whispered. "They remember." That night, rain poured harder than it had in years. The palace roof shook, and lightning struck the old fig tree in the courtyard, the same tree where the queen mother used to pray. The next morning the queen mother's fever broke and she was healed. But when she awoke, she spoke trembling words. I saw her in my dream, standing over a river of light. She said, "I forgive you." The king, realizing the truth, ordered Adana's release immediately. When they found her cell, the guards were stunned. The floor was covered with lilies blooming in the dark. And Adana, sitting among them, smiled gently. "The earth never forgets those who trust it," she said softly. The king knelt before her. "You have shamed us with your grace. How can I ever repay you?" "By learning what your mother never did," she replied. "That no one rules the earth, we only borrow its mercy." He nodded, eyes wet. Outside, the storm cleared and the sky turned blue again. The villagers gathered as word spread. The woman they once buried now stood higher than any throne. And as she walked out of the palace gates, the wind carried her words across the land. "They locked me in darkness, but I became the light." In the days that followed her release, a strange stillness fell over the kingdom. It wasn't the silence of fear, it was the quiet that comes after a storm, when hearts are unsure what to say next. Adana walked through the palace courtyard barefoot, feeling the cool earth beneath her feet. The same guards who had once dragged her to the dungeon now bowed as she passed. The servants whispered her name with awe, and the children peeked around corners to catch a glimpse of the woman the rain freed. But Adana did not seek praise. Each morning, she went to the river to wash the soil from her hands, to speak softly to the water that had witnessed her pain. "Let my heart not turn proud," she prayed. "Let me remain as the earth, silent but alive." The king visited her often, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I do not know how to face you," he confessed one afternoon. "I listened to my mother when I should have listened to truth." Adana turned to him, her expression calm. "When fear speaks, truth hides. You have seen what it costs to serve fear, now serve what grows instead." He lowered his head. "Then teach me." And so she did. She taught the king how to listen, not to the shouts of his court, but to the whispers of his people. She showed him the strength of patience, the courage in mercy, and how forgiveness, when given without weakness, could rebuild what anger had destroyed. Soon word spread that the palace had changed. The same halls that once echoed with gossip now filled with songs of gratitude. The fields began to flourish again, rain came in good measure, and families who had long abandoned the land returned. "It is her blessing," the elders said. "The one they buried now feeds the roots of our peace." Meanwhile, the queen mother, frail and trembling from her sickness, found no peace within herself. The image of Adana forgiving her haunted her nights. One evening, unable to bear the weight of her guilt, she went to Adana's hut by the river. Adana was sitting by a fire, weaving a basket. The flames lit her face softly, making her eyes seem endless. The Queen Mother hesitated, voice breaking. You should hate me. You should curse my name. I took your life, your freedom, your peace. Why do you stand here whole when I have nothing left? Adana didn't rise. She just gestured to the space beside her. Sit. The Queen Mother obeyed, her pride too tired to resist. Adana continued weaving. You ask why I don't hate you. Because hate would have kept me buried. Forgiveness was the only way out of the ground. Tears ran down the Queen Mother's cheeks. You have a spirit I cannot understand. Adana smiled faintly. That is because I learned to see beyond myself. You ruled through fear, but fear is a chain that binds both the captor and the captive. The Queen Mother nodded slowly, eyes glistening. You have freed me more than I deserve. Freedom is not deserved, Adana said gently. It is chosen. From that night, the Queen Mother withdrew from the palace and spent her days helping widows and the poor. People whispered that she had changed, that her pride had melted like wax in fire. She spoke little, but when she did, it was of the woman she once buried, and how the soil had given her back a teacher instead of a ghost. As seasons turned, Adana's name became legend. Travelers came from distant lands to hear her speak, to see the lilies that still bloomed around her hut no matter the weather. Children brought her offerings, small beads, mangoes, flowers, and she would smile and tell them stories of courage, of the river's patience, of the heart's quiet power. But one evening as the sun sank red behind the hills, she felt her strength fading. The years of toil, forgiveness, and rebuilding had taken their toll. She sat by the river watching the water shimmer and whispered, I have done all I was sent to do. The king arrived soon after, sensing something in his heart. He knelt beside her. The people love you, Adana. You cannot leave them yet. She looked at him with a tired smile. You forget, I never belonged to the palace. I belong to the earth, and the earth knows when to reclaim what it lent. He held her hand tightly, tears forming. Then let your spirit stay in this land. Let it guide us forever. The land already remembers, she said softly. Every kindness leaves a mark, just as every wound once did. As twilight deepened, she closed her eyes. The wind stirred gently, rustling the lilies that surrounded her hut. The river's song grew softer, almost like a lullaby. And when she took her last breath, it was with peace, not sorrow. The king buried her by the river, the same place where her story had begun. On her grave, lilies bloomed brighter than ever. From that day onward, the river became sacred. Women washed their faces there before childbirth. Farmers poured its water on their fields for good harvest. And when storms came, people said it was Adana's spirit, reminding them to stay humble, to rise, and to forgive. The Queen Mother visited her grave often. Sometimes she brought flowers, sometimes just her silence. One day a child asked her, Grandmother, who lies there? The old woman smiled faintly. The one who showed us that no door can stay closed forever. Years passed, and the story of Adana, the woman who was buried yet stood again, became a song whispered from mother to daughter, from village to village. The river where she once prayed became known as the River of Rising, and her grave beneath the flowering lilies turned into a place of pilgrimage. Women came there to seek courage before marriage, before childbirth, or when life had broken their spirits. They knelt in the same soil that once held Adana captive, touching it with trembling hands and whispered, Let me rise as she did. Children grew up hearing her tale not as tragedy but as triumph. The old storytellers began their fireside tales with, There was once a woman who was buried by envy, but she bloomed from beneath the earth. The listeners would grow quiet, their eyes glistening in the firelight as they imagined her, her hands pushing through soil, her heart unbroken, her spirit shimmering in the rain. The king ruled wisely until his last breath, guided by the lessons she left behind. He ordered that no woman be silenced or cast aside unjustly again, saying, To bury one woman is to bury a nation's wisdom. And in time the land flourished. Fields grew fertile, the rivers sang sweetly, and peace rested over the kingdom like morning mist. The Queen Mother, now frail and quiet, became a different woman altogether. Each dawn, she walked to the river with a cane in one hand and flowers in the other. She would lay the blooms gently by Adana's grave and whisper, You live in me now. Every breath I take is a prayer for the wrongs I made right too late. When she passed, they buried her not in the royal tombs but beside Adana, at her own request, saying she wanted her final rest near the woman who taught her what love truly was. Generations came and went. The palace crumbled, rebuilt, and changed hands. But the story never faded. In times of drought, women carried water from Adana's river to their homes, believing it carried her blessing. In times of injustice, when the world pressed heavy upon them, they sang her song. They buried her to end her name. But the rain remembered. From earth she rose, from pain she grew. And the world remembered her instead. One day, centuries later, a young girl named Nia sat by the same riverbank. Her mother had died, her family had scattered, and she had nothing left but her tears. As she wept, an old woman passing by asked, "Child, do you know whose grave this is?" Nia shook her head. The woman smiled gently. "This is where Adana rests, the one who taught us that no cage can hold a soul that remembers who it is." The girl wiped her tears. She was strong? The woman nodded. Strong enough to forgive. Strong enough to live again. Nia sat for a long while in silence, then rose, her shoulders a little straighter. She looked at the lilies swaying in the river breeze and whispered, "If she rose, then I will too." And so the story lived on, not carved in stone but carried in hearts. Every generation found a piece of Adana within themselves, in every woman who refused to give up, in every man who learned humility, in every child who believed that pain could still bloom into purpose. The river of rising became a symbol across kingdoms. Travelers would come from far lands, kneel at its edge and let the water run through their fingers. Some said they felt her presence in the wind, a voice as soft as water saying, "Stand tall even when buried." The earth remembers the brave. When the sunsets glowed over the river, painting it gold and crimson, the villagers would say it was Adana smiling upon them, not as a ghost but as a guardian of those who still dared to rise. Because her story was never about revenge. It was never about the cruelty that tried to break her. It was about the quiet, unshakable truth that no hand, no hate, no darkness can bury a light that chooses to shine again. And so, long after her name faded from royal scrolls, it lived in the mouths of storytellers, in the songs of women grinding millet at dawn, in the laughter of children chasing the river's edge. For Adana was no longer just a woman who escaped death, she had become the spirit of rebirth itself. And when the rains came each year, falling softly on her grave, the lilies would bloom once more as if whispering to the world, "Here lies the woman who was locked away." But the door opened when she stood tall.